A common scenario when developing with Phoenix LiveView is that we want to display some kind of list or collection of items with an empty state. Here, for example, I've created a very simple to-do app page rendered with LiveView that displays a list of tasks. Here's the code. It's very simple. As you can see in the mount callback, I'm loading my list of tasks from the database via a context called to-dos, and I'm displaying them using a stream. Streams are a new feature added in Phoenix LiveView 1.7. They're a way to render collections on the page in a memory-efficient way. I'm not going to go into much detail in this video explaining what streams are. I'm going to assume that you've already got at least a basic familiarity with them. If not, then Chris McCord, the creator of Phoenix, wrote a really good blog post introducing streams, which I'll link to, and the LiveView docs have a good explanation as well, so I suggest you go there first. Once you understand the basics of streams, this is a more advanced lesson. So I'm just using streams in a very standard way. In the LiveView model, I stream the tasks here using the stream function. Then in my template, I iterate over the stream in a for loop. Note that in order for the stream to work, the streamed collection needs to be wrapped in a DOM element with the attribute Phoenix update equals stream. And that wrapper element also needs to have a DOM ID, which in this case, I'm just using the ID tasks. Now, tasks have a simple data model. They just have a single attribute called their title, and you create tasks using this form that appears in a modal. The details don't matter, except that after a task is created, we insert it into the stream using stream insert, and then when we mark a task as done, all we're doing is deleting it from the database. And after we delete it, we also delete it from the stream using stream delete. And so again, this is just a totally normal basic way to use streams. Now this works fine, but there's kind of a problem with the UX, which we can see if we mark all my tasks as done, i.e. we delete them all. What we see here is that the page is just empty now. It's very blank and empty looking. So this is kind of bad UX. We can imagine that, say for example, I've just signed up to this app, so I don't have any tasks yet. I'm going to come to this page and it looks so bare. It might look like something's wrong. I might think, what is this? What do I need to do here? So it would be better if we had some kind of empty state when there aren't any tasks. Rather than showing nothing, we show something that just explains that you currently have no tasks and gives the user a bit of guidance about what to do. That would be much better UX. So I'll add a simple empty state, just this div, and here's what it looks like. But of course the problem here is that it's still there even when I actually have a task. So we need to wrap this in some kind of conditional logic so that it's only shown when there are no tasks. Now you might think that we could do this just with a simple if-else statement, i.e. we wrap it in something like if enum.any streams tasks. If there is anything in the stream, then we show that collection, else we show the empty state. But we can see there's an error here. You can read the error message yourself, but the fundamental problem here is that streams aren't a simple Elixir construct like a list or a tuple which we could iterate over in the normal way. They're their own weird black box and they're limited in what they can do. They give us this advantage of saving us memory on the server, but the disadvantage is that we lose access to all the normal things we can do with collections, like passing them to functions of the enum module. The only thing that we're allowed to do with that streams.tasks is iterate over it with that for loop, and all those other things like enum.any become inaccessible. Now the first time I came across this, my initial reaction was I thought, okay, well maybe I can just add an additional assign to handle the conditional, because I can't use enum.any on streams.tasks, but I can use it in the mount callback on that tasks collection before I've even streamed it. So I could, for example, if we rearrange things here slightly, I could add a new assign to the socket called any tasks. And that's just going to be a boolean storing the result of enum any tasks. And then I can stream the actual tasks like I did before. And then over here in the template, I can just replace that call to enum any with a reference to my new assign. And now over here we can see that it's worked. But then there's an obvious disadvantage here, which is that if I delete that, it doesn't reappear. I have to refresh the page. And then when it is here, when I do add a new task, I have to refresh the page again until it shows up, because you see that any tasks assigned, it's not getting updated when we insert or delete a new task. So the way we would fix that is we would have to go down to the place where we insert a new task using stream insert, and we'd have to also update any tasks. And the same in stream delete, we would need to, every time we change the contents of the collection, we would need to also change that boolean to make sure that it's still up to date. That's just going to get really verbose, really unwieldy, especially if our collection gets more complicated and there's more stream inserts or stream deletes. It's just not maintainable. It's not a good idea. So how else can we do it? Well, what's another way to show or hide an HTML element? We've been trying to do it here at the Elixir level using if and else in Elixir, but that's not the only way. We can also show or hide an HTML element using CSS. For example, if I just remove that if-else statement again, another way that we can hide this div is to give it the Tailwind class hidden, which is just a shorthand for the CSS property display none. And if we go back to the browser again, we can see that it's become hidden, except now it's always hidden, so what we need is some kind of way that we can apply that CSS class conditionally. And we don't have to do that at the Elixir level, we can do it at the CSS level using CSS pseudo classes. Pseudo classes are things like hover, focus, first child. They're ways that you can tell CSS to only apply a certain CSS rule if the given CSS conditions are met. And Tailwind has a whole host of selectors that we can use as easy proxies to get those CSS pseudo classes. And there's a long list here in the docs of all the different pseudo classes that are available. So one that we could potentially use here would be only. What only does is it tells the CSS to only apply the given rule if the element in question is the only child of its parent. So think about how we can apply that here. Well, first of all, let's just revert what we have over here. So we're back to the original way we were doing it, just with that simple stream of tasks. And then let's look at our template. So right now, the only pseudo selector isn't going to do anything because this div is not the only child of its parent, but there's a way that we can make that work using something quite clever. All we have to do is take that div and move it inside the wrapper div for the stream. And then to get the conditional behavior, all we have to do is add an additional Tailwind class, only block, which means that we apply the block style. Block just means display block. It's just the default display behavior. It just means that the element is shown, not hidden. And we're only going to apply that when this div is the only child of its parent, and in other cases we're going to apply hidden. So actually when it's the only child of the parent, both of those Tailwind classes are going to be in effect, because this one's always in effect because it's not behind a selector. But according to CSS rules, only block will override hidden because this one has the more specific selector. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go and look up CSS precedence rules and learn more about how that works. So how does this work? Well, think about it. What's going to happen if that task stream is empty? If there are no tasks to stream, then it's going to be as if that div isn't there in the first place. And so this div, this empty state, will be the only child of its parent, so that only pseudo selector is going to apply, and we apply the block style. But as soon as there are any tasks, as soon as there's anything to iterate over here in this stream, that means there's going to be at least one occurrence of this iterated div, which means there are going to be at least two children of the wrapper parent, i.e. the empty state, and at least one task, which means this one is no longer the only child, and so only block doesn't apply, and so it's hidden. And so if we go back to our tasks list, you can see here that the empty state is visible because there aren't any tasks. But if I add one, it gets hidden by CSS. If I delete that again, it reappears. And that's all just being handled by the conditional CSS pseudo selectors. So this works really well. So there you have it. That's a really nice, really simple way to get that empty state behavior on a stream. And we've done it entirely through CSS. We haven't actually changed anything in the module from what we started. We haven't had to change anything about how we're streaming the tasks. The only thing we've changed is the template, and the only thing we've done is just add that one div containing the empty state and using those two Tailwind classes to hide it or show it. And it works really well. Just one thing to note, you need to make sure that this empty state has an ID. If you don't have the ID, then bad things are going to happen. You see here it doesn't reappear, and that's just because of how LiveView and streams work. It's updating everything on the front end based on their DOM IDs, and so if you don't give it a DOM ID, then it's not going to know how to do it. So if this isn't working for you, just make sure you've actually added an HTML ID to that empty state. But other than that, there's not much to note. It's quite simple, and it works really well. I use this all the time in most of my streams. So let me know how it works for you.